Hello and welcome to the Small Agency Talk Show. I'm Chip Griffin, and I'm very excited to have with me today Lee McKnight Jr. of RSW US because we always have fun when Lee is on the show.
Dude, thank you for having me again. Looking forward to it.
It is great to have you here. And I'm just getting a bulletin in my ear. The CDC says if we are fully vaccinated, we don't need to wear these inside anymore.
Woo!
I think I'm going to get rid of that. Of course, I ripped out my in-ear in the process, but that's okay. See, that's the problem with props. You know, you are much better with the props, Lee, than I am. So,
I put the Velvet Elvis behind me today, by the way. I just thought you might get a kick out of that.
Oh, nice. See? Classing up the joint.
But, that is what I'm doing.
But we can't dive into the meat of the show until I play the little musical jingle. So let me play the musical jingle, and then we'll start talking. There we go. All right. Got the energy levels up there with a little bit of nice jazz music. And, okay, so it's Friday. It's a small agency talk show. We're always happy that it's Friday because it means the weekend's ahead, and I love it because I get to have these fun conversations. So if you are new to the show, remember you can use the chat or comment box on whatever platform you're watching on to share your thoughts, be snarky, ask a question, whatever you want. We're going to spend the next 30 minutes or so talking about mostly small agency issues, but sometimes we get sidetracked, and, well, Lee and I sometimes get sidetracked. What can I say?
Yeah, it does.
It happens.
Yeah.
But I guess that, before we dive into, some really meaty topics, well, I guess this is sort of a meaty one, but, let's talk about that whole mask thing. And we don't have mask debates or anything like that, but agencies and all businesses are starting to try to figure out, okay, with this new guidance that we're getting and with the progress that seems to be being made on the vaccination front, how does that change our business? How does it change what we bring to the office? How does it change events, which have been, a lifeblood of business development for agencies? And so, I'd like to take a couple of minutes and just, kind of get your reaction and see, where you think things stand based on all of the agencies you're talking with.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, obviously, it's timely. As I was thinking about this topic, first I thought about, and we've touched on this maybe in the past a little bit, but, when all this hit, and obviously we're still not, we haven't flipped the switch yet and we're all back to normal, but we're, getting closer, right? But it's thinking about new business, which is what, what we live and breathe here at RSW for agencies. And, it really hit, well, of course it hit people hard, but I'm specifically in terms of some of these new business directors, right, who did count on, the outside sales technique in terms of conferences, networking, especially those agencies, and they tend to be those small to mid-sized agencies, right, who are focusing locally or regionally. When all that went away, that hit some of those folks hard, and some of those folks didn't make it. And in terms of that particular agency, and ideally, hopefully they found other things. But what we found agencies doing, and certainly the ones I talked to, whether it was using someone like ourselves or just finding someone that had more of that inside sales prowess, it's going to be really interesting now to see how quickly or not they start to move back into in-person meetings. And, we have a new client, for example, it's actually here in town. Oh gosh, in about a month is their kickoff. And wondering how we're going to do that. Are we going to do it in person? I mean, it seems like if we're vaccinated, why not? But in the conferences are going to be really interesting, don't you think? Because I think part of it's going to be kind of irreparably changed. And I know when we did our virtual conference, and Chip, you were a part of that, just back in February, I was afraid at that point people were going to be through with the virtual thing, right? Like, I've had enough, one more Zoom thing or I'm done. We actually had a really good turnout. And, it's going to be interesting to see in the future. I mean, I personally would love to be going back in person to things like that. Mm-hmm. But some people obviously are not. So I think that it's going to be really interesting to see how we come out of it from that new business perspective and more in person.
Yeah, I mean, I think people are going to be a lot more, well, so I think at first, and particularly, it really feels to me like in the last few weeks, there's been this society-wide, a huge increase in the momentum towards getting back to some form of old normal, right, as opposed to the new normal that we've been living. And there eventually will be a new normal, just to be confusing.
Yeah, right.
but I think so. I think there's going to be a burst of activity in the coming months, leaning more towards, frankly, the leisure side. People want to get out and see people. They want to. I mean, I know a lot of people who've already been vaccinated, and they're starting to take some personal trips, starting to go see family, starting to go to a beach somewhere, those kinds of things. So I think we're going to see a burst of that kind of activity. I think we'll also see it on the business side, and people do just want to get out and start seeing people professionally again. But I think then it'll settle down, and then that's the question to me, as we get into Q4 and Q1 of next year, what are the decisions people are making about going to events and traveling for in-person meetings with clients? And my gut tells me that people are going to be more discriminating in what they choose to travel for or go to in person, because we've realized that there are a lot of benefits to doing some of this more remote connection, and so finding a way to balance it, I think, is where most people are going to land.
I think so. I mean, when we do kickoff meetings with a brand new client, initial discovery, like a 3.5 hour, and what we used to do pre-COVID was our president Mark and I, we go to see that client. Number one, just to make the personal connection, but also it's helpful, right, to see the building, get to know the culture, at least initially. And, that part of it, we really missed, in the sense of being able to meet them in person. Having said that, not getting up at 3:30 in the morning to go to the Cincinnati airport,
right,
and go back typically in the same day and get home at like 1 in the morning, did not miss that at all.
Right.
and no one has, right? So it's, I think discriminating is exactly the right word, because I do want to start, I hope we do more of that or get back into some of that. But I think it's going to be kind of fascinating, and it's still kind of touchy with folks, right? Because we're thinking about how do people come back to our office, and what is permanently changed now. We're not saying everyone has to come back. I mean, I don't know if anyone is, but you certainly see some companies that are saying we need folks back 2 and 3 days a week. So some of the larger companies, I know, like Nike, I think is doing that coming up here in a month. Just happened to hear that, for example. But it's going to be really interesting.
I mean, there are certainly agencies who are, pushing for the 5-day-a-week model to return. I mean, some agency owners that I know are
they really
pushing in that direction.
Okay.
So I think there is still some of that desire. The problem is that I think a lot of employees have gotten used to doing it, differently, obviously, and they like the benefits of it. Now, there are certainly some who would like to return to the office full-time or part-time, but I think that it's going to be very difficult for most businesses that are in the agency type space, professional services, the typical office worker. I think it's going to be very difficult to go to a full-time in-person model again. Because it's just not where people have gotten to psychologically. We've seen that you can be just as productive remotely. It doesn't mean that you will be, but you can be.
Right. No, that really is it. I mean, there's going to be pushback. It's going to be interesting. And I feel for the owners of the businesses. And I'm surprised to hear, I haven't heard of anybody yet that's pushing for the full comeback. As far as agencies that I've talked to, now I'm not quizzing every one of them, but that'll be interesting. Yeah, and I think because I know that's what small and mid-sized agencies, that's what we're living and breathing, right?
Right. Yeah.
Those that'll be interesting to see, especially with those.
It will, and obviously we don't know exactly where things are headed, and hopefully things continue to progress the way they are and all that kind of stuff. But I'm sure this will be an ongoing discussion. But I do want to pivot from here because this whole, and it really flows nicely from that conversation, because one of the things that we've seen over the last year is a real explosion in the use of video in the agency space. And I think that's a great thing. I mean, whether it's, I know people talk about Zoom fatigue, but I have to tell you, I love that we can do meetings by Zoom, because you can read people by looking at them in this format. It's so much more valuable to have a conversation that way than, you're sitting on the telephone, and, what are we all doing when we're on the telephone? We're kind of looking around, I'm checking my email, and it's completely rude when you do it, but we've all done it, right? So
not me.
No, of course not. because you're a much better person than I am. But Zoom, you really do have that sense of connection. Yeah. But more importantly, agencies have found ways to use video in other ways, right? So, and I'm obviously not an agency at the moment, but, one of the things that I have done a lot of are these video interviews or conversations like this show. And this was very difficult to get anyone in the agency space to agree to do pre-March of 2020.
Oh, yeah,
right? It was,
for sure.
I'd have people say, you're going to record this?
Isn't that crazy? And I know.
Yeah. I mean, and now, it's sort of assumed. So if I do a podcast interview, people just sort of assume it's going to be on video.
Right.
And I love that because it allows you to make that connection, not just one-on-one, but it then brings that to the audience. So, but there are also other creative ways of using video, and I know this is something that we talked a little bit about via email. But this is something that agencies need to be thinking about. How do you continue to use video creatively, both for your clients, for marketing your agency, and for business development?
Yeah, it is going to be interesting. And I think there's you see two ways. One is just as far as just content, and especially during the pandemic, agencies, we've talked about this before. But did many of them doing a nice job of creating, whether it was a new podcast or video series or what have you. Again, what's going to be interesting now is, are they able to keep it up? Because it's tough, as you and I both well know. But the other thing that is, in my mind, at least for agencies, is still fairly new. It's not that it's a new platform per se, and there may be others, but Vidyard is one. I wish I could say they're a sponsor of mine, or they're paying nothing, but
great. Let's give some free airtime to
people. Exactly. Well, they're getting it. But really, I mean, there was one agency in particular, but there have actually been others since that are using that platform, and there is a paid version, but the initial version is free, and they're using it not at the top of the funnel, which I find kind of fascinating. We'll go back to that, but they're using it as follow-up and personalizing that follow-up. So and for agencies, if you don't know what it is, you can go check it out. And there are others, but this particular agency, it was really good because what they were able to do was a very brief demo. They had a first meeting with a prospect. Say, hey, going to follow up. Great talk with you. And then, would follow up. I think it was maybe the next day, right? Said, oh, by the way, we talked about this, or you were interested in this piece. And they record this video where you can share your screen, just like on Zoom or something else. Say, hey, it was great meeting with you, whatever that is, and say, I told you that we had talked about at one point would love to show you a demo. Thought I'd just real quick share my screen and show you this. And the whole thing was 3 minutes. I mean, it was the perfect length, not too long. And I think this one agency's closed 3 pieces of business. Whether or not they can say it was directly because of that, but absolutely it helped, and it was mentioned that it helped from that prospect. And I think agencies need to be thinking about that and practicing with that. For myself, I've never used it because what we do, I suppose I could find a demo maybe from our tech stack, but that's not really, what I'm trying to figure out is more like at the top of the funnel. If you don't have something you're demoing, how could you use it then? And I don't know the answer to that yet, but I think that part of video is going to really be big in the coming year, as far as reaching out and trying to differentiate yourself, rather than cold LinkedIn selling or all the other stuff that we get every day that just gets delete,
Right.
Have you done anything like that, or know agencies who've used that type of platform?
Yeah, I think that the real benefit of these kinds of videos is that it allows you to have yet another personalized connection
for sure
with somebody, right? So, and the value of someone seeing you and hearing you is so much bigger than just reading an email or reading something on a web page. And,
absolutely.
One of the things that I've discovered in my own coaching business is that when an agency comes to me and they've seen some of my videos, it accelerates that sales process dramatically because they already feel like they've gotten to know me. Even though this may not be like Vidyard where it's specifically targeted at that one individual, they feel like you were talking to me. Oh, yeah. And so they know my voice, they know my personality, they've got some sense as to how kind of kooky I can be at times, but also the quality of the advice. And so those are the kinds of things that I think can really help agencies, if not bring in more sales, at least accelerate that process by shortening the get to know you time.
It builds that, you talk about building trust, and it's an overused word in that sense. And I think, a lot of times the pushback is, well, especially at that top of the funnel, you haven't built trust. You don't know each other yet. That's too soon to use that term. But there is still there's that type of trust where, to your point, and I can say the same, when we started our video series 2 years ago, I can directly point to about 6 different clients minimally. Whether that was ultimately, it was more than just that, but that's how it started. And to your point, they had seen me and other folks many times to the point where they would say, I kind of feel like I know you already, I've had, agencies tell me that. And it is, I can't stress enough, and it is work, but once you get into it and you get into the flow, it does become somewhat easier. It's still, you got to take the time to do it, but that's going to.
Well, and I want to come back to that in a minute, because I think there are some since we both do a lot of video, there are probably some things we can offer up to folks as tips on how to make it easier, right? Because it doesn't have to be complex. It doesn't have to be time consuming, or it doesn't have to be extensively time consuming, at least.
Yep.
But I think the other thing is that with video, you can't fake it. And so when it comes to trust, if you're writing a blog post, it can be ghost written. You don't know if it's really that person. But with video, I guess if you're a really good actor or news anchor, you can sort of fake it, but it's not the same. And most folks in the agency space aren't that way anyway. So being able to see and hear us here, we're not faking this. This is who we are.
Yeah.
Love it or hate it.
It is.
It is what it is, And so if you think that my opening with the mask was kooky, all right, so what? I'm just you're not a good fit for me, and I'm not a good fit for you. That's fine, no big deal. And ultimately, agencies need to find the right matches anyway. So if you can use this to help get there, that's great. But let's talk about some of those tips for how people can do video more easily, because there are so many tools available now that it doesn't have to be this scary proposition that it was, even 5 or 10 years ago.
For me, when I have agencies ask me, certainly the biggest thing up front, probably one of the biggest hurdles is just, okay, what are we going to talk about? What is the content going to be? And man, agencies, and it's the same with any content that you create, right? Agencies have such a tough time getting over that hurdle because they feel like no one's going to care. It's like, well, no, actually, prospects will care if you present something that's quality. And so the first thing I always come back and say is, think about what you do for your current clients. You feel like you don't know what you're going to talk about. One of the first places to look is, let's just think about what are the challenges that you're helping your client solve. If that is ultimately, in theory, the reason you would do this as an agency is to bring in more business. Now, that doesn't mean that you couldn't make it more personal, because I know several agency leaders that they have a video series that actually isn't designed. It still is designed to get new business, but it's a personal level, and it's more kind of about the brand, and that can totally work. But I think that's certainly the first step is what do you want this to be,
right? And know who you're talking to. Right. I think that's a big mistake that a lot of folks in the agency space make when it comes to content marketing, whether it's written or audio or video. They're not keeping in mind who they're trying to speak to.
Yeah.
And so oftentimes, and I was guilty of this myself when I was creating things, 15 years ago or so, and wasn't really, I was doing what I like to do, but I was ending up speaking more to my peers than prospects.
Yep.
And peers can be a legitimate strategy for content marketing, but it has to be intentional if you're doing that. Probably you want to speak to prospects. Maybe you want to speak to job seekers if you're doing a lot of hiring, and so you are trying to put some of that in there. So you can have multiple audiences, but you really need to keep that in mind with the content you're creating and speak to them. Just as this show speaks specifically to agency owners, because that's who you and I are interested in talking to, right? So, yes, it's interesting to us, but we have to make sure it's interesting to the viewer as well.
Yeah. Yep, for sure. And I think certainly another piece of it, jumping ahead a little bit, but once you've got that down and you are creating the content, it's like any other piece of content. You can't just let it sit. And again, agencies, it's the same with new business, tend to give up sooner than they should. And I get it. When you first start out, it's not like, as my kids like to point out, our video series, it's not like we're getting crazy YouTube star numbers. So you can't get discouraged about that either. Now, yes, you need ultimately views, but especially at first, I mean, what do we have subscriber wise? I'll say this and embarrass myself, but for our video series, I think we're up to like 300 now. Mm-hmm. That's not a huge number by any stretch of the imagination, but we can see, right, who's doing that. Almost every single one of them literally is an agency.
Right. Because who else is watching that, right? I mean, right. You can't compare yourself to sort of, the large scale YouTubers because they have millions of people who might be interested in that.
Right.
There's a pretty small universe of people who are going to be interested by comparison in agency business topics.
True.
Right? And that's fine. And we don't need, I mean, you and I do not need in our businesses millions of clients, right? We just don't. We couldn't handle it even if we did.
Correct.
Right? And most agencies are the same way. I mean, a good agency may have, 10, 15, 20 clients at any given time. It's not a volume play. And so, 300 subscribers can be plenty to get the kind of flow that you need in order to close the number of deals that you need in order to grow the way you want.
Yeah. I like to be the center of attention, so I would like a million subs though. And
sure,
we're working on it.
Yeah. I mean, I love seeing my view count go up, and if you put a camera and microphone in front of me, you're not going to shut me up. So, but that said, I'll do it if there's nobody watching because it's just fun.
Sure, exactly. Yeah, and so I think up front, agencies you have to stick with it. And then certainly what's going to help, and I need to adhere to my own advice here is, what we will try to do is tape bi-weekly. And so the ideal is, I will write a script the following week, we will record and, getting ahead of time, trying to prep that. And what I found is I wanted to try to control that writing quite a bit, and not that it's not all about me by any stretch. It's about agency new business and it's about our company, but and how we can help agencies, but opening it up, to other people, which might sound like, well, kiddingly, but really it's a lot of folks. I've had agencies say the same thing, like, I really kind of want to, it can help, especially as you get into multiple. We're on episode 74 now, and it starts to get tough. I mean, I don't know how to tell you, Chip, okay, agency new business, there's a certain amount of topics and you can bring in and be creative about some things, but there's like your bread and butter. And it's just really helpful, not, sometimes too many cooks. What I found is, to get some feedback from folks is a huge help because it can be so insular. It's just like agency new business and, cobbler's children kind of thing. But that's been hugely helpful too. So I think agencies shouldn't be afraid to get feedback on that content, especially early.
Right, and you're full of, I mean, you get asked questions by prospects and clients all the time. You know what they're asking. And so all you have to do is keep your ears open and someone asks this question, okay, great, that's probably a good topic for a quick YouTube video or something that I'm going to share on LinkedIn or wherever. There's a lot of different ways that you can come up with the topics. I think the thing that scares people more so than not having the topics, though, is the tech around it. And like, how do I even go about doing this? And it has become incredibly easy to do at least decent quality video. Now, we're not talking like broadcast quality. You don't need broadcast quality. I mean, to me, you need to come up with a process so that this is something that is relatively simple and straightforward to do, and you don't need a lot of fancy gear. I have a lot of fancy gear. I could do this show very easily without all of that fancy gear, but it wouldn't be as much fun for me. So,
absolutely.
I think it is what it is.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And because I know my wife has been with her company. She didn't know what ton. She's in marketing, didn't know a ton about that side of it, and it's amazing just how much you can learn. And for example, she has, because I wasn't much help on the tech side. Thankfully, we have Craig here in the office who does that part of it. I know a little bit, but it's for agencies. You're exactly right, and folks watching. I mean, it's there's so much information out there. Obviously, Google's your friend, where you can find the tech and find like what you need. And to your point, don't have to spend a ton of money. I mean, there is going to be an investment, but it's amazing, today what kind of quality you can get without just dropping a ton of cash. And obviously, it gets up to you because, to your point, it does start to get fun, and it's like anything else. Like I play guitar, not that well, mind you, but you start getting into it. It's like, ooh, I need that pedal, or and it actually is fun. and it's cool to be able to kind of improve as you go. So yeah, that shouldn't be a barrier to agencies today.
Yeah, and at the simplest level, you can do interview-style conversations like we do on this show, and you could do that as a pre-recorded thing. And so we're doing this live on StreamYard. You can use StreamYard to do recorded things too, though. So when I do my Chats with Chip podcast, I use StreamYard for those interviews. You just go in, you don't send it to any social network at all, and you're able to just hit record, have the conversation, hit end, download it, and you've got something that you can upload to YouTube or wherever you want to put it. And it only requires the same technology that you would use for Zoom. And guess what? You and every possible guest that you might have uses Zoom these days.
Yeah, right.
So you're all set, right? I mean, you may want to work on a few things. You may want to, improve your lighting a little bit, because if you're going to record it, you may not want it to be as dark. You want to make sure that you've got, an okay microphone. But there are USB microphones out there for $50 to $100 that are really tremendous, and you can certainly do that. You want to make sure that you're sitting, clearly on the camera. Don't be sitting there, with your head down at the bottom of the screen, so it looks like you've been decapitated. I watched a very widely listened to webinar last year where there were, I think, 10,000 people on it or something. And it was a very prominent individual leading it, and her head was down right at the very bottom. I'm like, just sit up, sit up. Right.
Oh, that means
so
on there. Wow.
So simple things like that, and make it so that it take away the technology barriers, focus on the content first, and then you can work on upgrading the technology, improving the editing, all that kind of stuff somewhere down the road.
Because editing software, and we can move on, but I'm asking you directly because obviously but editing software itself has gotten much less complicated, correct?
Yes, I mean there's some very good software out there that's relatively simple. There's a lot of stuff out there that's actually free that's really good. Not necessarily simple, but DaVinci Resolve, if you want to be doing some good editing, that's actually a free piece of software that Hollywood uses.
Interesting.
So it's something that you can certainly use. Adobe Premiere, if you've already got the Adobe suite, which a lot of agencies do. Adobe Premiere is what I use, and I've used it for a long time. I wouldn't say that either DaVinci Resolve or Adobe Premiere are necessarily easy.
Right.
But there are so many tutorials out there on how to use them that you can actually get into it pretty easily. I mean, I'm by no means a professional video editor, but I can do passable work on that so that I can turn out whatever kind of video I want, and you can do that too. There are also, I mean, if you on Macs, there's iMovie and things like that. There are so many ways that you can do this pretty easily these days.
Yeah, for sure. Interesting. Cool.
And I think, and the other thing is just ask around, right? Yeah. The agency community is generally very willing to help each other. Up to a point, right? Up until the point where it's, maybe you're taking my business from me. But, if you're sitting there and you see someone in the agency space who's, doing a video that you like, just, shoot them an email and say, hey, how are you doing that? What? Sure. And some of them are using professional editors. Some of them may have in-house talent. Some of them are doing them themselves. There's a lot of different ways. And so you just ask that question and you can start figuring it out and you learn as you go. And it's just, make it a constant improvement. Don't try to be broadcast quality from day one because that's a losing battle. It's you really just need to start creating the content and you will continue to get better over time.
And you think about how many agencies already have those capabilities in-house.
Right.
For client work, if you aren't taking advantage of that, that's crazy. As an agency, there's going to be time, restraints and constraints, but good Lord, if it's all there already.
Yeah, and every agency needs to be looking at, or just about every agency needs to be looking at upping their video game anyway. Yeah. Because it's becoming increasingly important as far as the overall suite of services that you're providing to clients. I mean, even traditional PR agencies need to have video capabilities these days because you're doing virtual press conferences and things like that. So it's people think about video and they think about digital marketing and digital agencies and that kind of stuff, but it's so much more widespread and we all need to be getting up to speed on it if we're not already and starting to experiment. And the best way to experiment is on yourself.
Yeah.
If you want to learn
Right.
video, start creating video and do it on your own time, on your own dime. Don't do it when it's client critical and you know,
Right.
there's a real cost to screwing up. Do it on your own thing. And if you screw it up and you don't publish on the scheduled day, so what?
Yeah.
No big deal.
It's okay. Right.
It's okay. And I mean, the other thing to keep in mind is there's a lot of good used gear out there too that you can buy.
Oh, very true.
And so you can actually get some pretty high quality stuff. In fact, I'm doing this right now on a used camera that I picked up for about $300 from B&H Photo. It's a very high quality camera, but it's about 7 or 8 years old. Guess what? You don't need a brand new $4,000 camera to do high quality web video today. You just don't. So look for those opportunities too.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, totally agree.
So
Love it.
Well, unfortunately, we've chatted our way right out of this entire half hour. It's my little timer on the screen here says
the big spam.
Oh, so
about the little spam.
So, and is there a message with that, or is that just random?
I just like spam.
No, just.
It's just fun.
Do you eat spam?
I've made spam burgers. I've done it. Yeah. It's very salty.
It is very salty.
But spam, if you want to sponsor me for anything, I'm down. I'm here. Throwing my hat in the ring right now.
Just make sure if you're doing spam, it needs to be the right kind of spam.
Oh,
the canned spam,
nice.
Because you don't want to run into problems with canned spam.
I love it.
See,
you took my game and you went way up there with it.
This is the horrible corniness that people are subjected to. So once again, demonstrating that video, you can't lie. It is what it is. So, Lee, this has been great. If someone wants to learn more about you or RSW US, where can they go?
Yeah, you can go to rswus.com. We have a new site coming out in about 3 weeks. We're excited. So,
looking forward to that.
Questions? Yeah, we are.
Excellent. Well, thanks for joining me. Thank you, everybody, for listening and watching. I hope you have a great weekend, and I look forward to seeing you all back here next Friday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time for another episode of the Small Agency Talk Show.
Absolutely. Thanks, Chip.